Chapter 1. Joy Stonefist. Joy Stonefist's backstory was carved in hardship and iron. Born to a human mother who was raped by an orc in a village ravaged by orc raiders, her life began in blood and fire. The infant survived by miracle alone, found swaddled in a tiny crib with nothing but a crude inscription that read, Joy. When the dwarves of Mithril Hall arrived to aid the battered village, they found her alone, screaming for a mother already gone. Delvana and Gavin Stonefist, a dwarven couple unable to have children of their own, took the half-orc child in. Though Joy was half-orc by blood, they raised her as a dwarf, teaching her the ways of their people, the stonecraft, the honor of tradition, and the ferocity of dwarven pride. Gavin, a decorated battle rager of Mithril Hall, often reminded her, "Your heart beats with the rhythm of stone." Strong, unyielding. Joy grew tall and strong, towering over her dwarven kin by adolescence. Though her appearance marked her as different, gray-green skin, tusks just poking from her jaw, she earned her place among the clans. The young half-orc proved herself in the dwarvish games and battle tournaments, where her strength and competitive fire were unmatched. She trained endlessly, and while her stepfather hoped she'd follow his path as a battle rager, Joy carved her own way, embracing the path of the totem warrior, spirit of the bear. Her connection to the bear gave her resilience and might beyond the ordinary, and her presence inspired awe. Now a respected warrior, Joy served in Mithril Hall's military, leading a handful of guards assigned to her command. Her latest task, seemingly mundane, was to escort a caravan of standard goods to Nesmi, a trip most considered routine. Bandits occasionally prowled the roads, but the journey promised no glory, just duty. The road stretched long and quiet that day, the air biting with the chill of the north. Joy led her small band with practiced ease, walking at the front as her axe rested against her broad shoulder. Her guards, seasoned but complacent, chatted among themselves as their boots crunched the frost-covered dirt. "It's too quiet," murmured Rurik, a stout dwarf with a missing eye. Joy smirked. "Quiet's good, Rurik. Means we'll reach the town sooner." But the words barely left her mouth before the attack came. The ambush struck like lightning. A volley of arrows hissed from the tree line, pelting the caravan. Horses screamed, dwarves shouted, and the world erupted in chaos. Bandits, cloaked and armed, burst from their hiding spots, rushing the wagons with swords and clubs. Joy roared, her voice cutting through the madness like a war horn. "Form up! Defend the goods!" Her guards scrambled into position, axes clashing against incoming blades. Joy didn't hesitate. She charged forward, her massive frame barreling into the fray like an avalanche. With a sweep of her great axe, she knocked two bandits off their feet, the weapon whirling in deadly arcs. She kept her head, even as the bandits pressed hard. "Rurik, flank left. Torda, get those archers." Her orders were sharp, her voice steady, and her guards obeyed without question. Bandits fell one after another, but the fight wasn't without cost. Blood stained the road, and Joy caught glimpses of her comrades taking wounds. Still, they held the line, rallying around her strength and tactics. Then, as quickly as it began, it ended. The remaining bandits scattered like rats, abandoning their dead. Joy panted, surveying the carnage. Her guards were bloodied but alive, and the caravan remained intact. All but one bandit had escaped. The leader, a tall figure with a dark cloak and a glint of steel, had slipped away in the chaos. Joy narrowed her eyes, her jaw tightening. "Coward," she muttered. By sundown, they reached Nesmi, weary but victorious. The town's gates welcomed them with little fanfare, just another caravan arriving on the frostbitten road. Joy saw to her men first, ensuring they were fed and rested before heading to the tavern herself. The place was warm, filled with the smell of ale and roasting meat. She dropped into a chair by the fire, letting her axe rest against the table as she nursed a tankard of ale. For the first time since the ambush, she allowed herself to relax. And then, out of the corner of her eye, she saw him. The bandit leader, cloak on, dressed like any other traveler, stood at the bar, chatting with the innkeeper as if nothing had happened. His face was sharp, his demeanor too casual, but Joy's blood ran hot with recognition. Her fingers tightened around her tankard. "You," she growled under her breath. Joy rose slowly, her towering frame impossible to ignore as she crossed the tavern floor. The bandit leader's eyes flicked to her, recognition sparking, but he didn't move. Whether it was arrogance or confidence, Joy didn't know and didn't care. "Didn't think I'd see you again so soon," Joy said, her voice low but dangerous. The man smirked, unfazed by the half-orc's imposing presence. "Funny. I could say the same about you. You were quite the storm back there." Joy's hand hovered near her axe. "You ran. I don't take kindly to cowards." "I prefer to call it a strategic withdrawal," he replied smoothly, taking a sip from his tankard. "No shame in knowing when to fight another day." The tavern had grown quiet, all eyes on the two figures squaring off. Joy's lip curled, her patience wearing thin. "You attacked my caravan and tried to kill my men." Her voice carried a dangerous edge. "Give me one reason not to split you in two right now." The bandit leader's smile faltered, but he held her gaze. "Because I can tell you something you'll want to hear." Joy paused, her brow furrowing. "Spit it out." He leaned in slightly, his voice lowering so only she could hear. "What if I told you the ambush wasn't random? Someone paid for that attack." Joy's eyes narrowed, the weight of his words settling like a stone in her gut. "Go on," she said, her tone icy. Before the bandit could reply, the entire tavern erupted into chaos. Flames burst to life, licking the walls and crawling across the floor, as if the entire building had been set ablaze in an instant. Patrons screamed and bolted for the door, chairs overturning and tankards crashing to the ground. The bandit leader staggered back, his eyes wide with panic. But Joy didn't flinch. She sniffed the air, her brow furrowing. "This isn't right," she muttered. From the corner of the room, a voice piped up with a delighted laugh. "Oh, it's not real, dear." But it got everyone's attention, didn't it? Joy turned sharply, her gaze landing on a woman perched casually atop an overturned table. She was dressed in colorful robes, her dark hair cascading down her shoulders, and a mischievous grin spread across her face. "Who in the nine hells are you?" Joy barked. The woman gave an exaggerated bow, flames flickering harmlessly around her. "Marlene Etosh, illusionist extraordinaire. And it looks like I arrived just in time." She waved her fingers dramatically, and the illusionary fire evaporated like mist, leaving the tavern intact but thoroughly rattled. The bandit leader, still pale, gaped at her. "What was that?" Marlene winked. "Oh, just a bit of fun. You looked like you needed cooling off." The bandit leader bolted for the door, shoving a stool into Joy's path as he sprinted outside. Joy roared in frustration, knocking the stool aside and charging after him. "Move," she barked at the patrons scattering from her path. The bandit turned a sharp corner, his boots pounding against the cobblestones. But as he rounded the bend, he skidded to a halt. A squad of town guards stood waiting, their weapons drawn and expressions stern. The commotion from the bar had clearly drawn their attention. "Hold it right there," one of the guards shouted. The bandit leader cursed under his breath, spinning on his heel, only to see Joy bearing down on him like a charging bull. "Got you now," she growled, closing the distance. With nowhere left to run, the bandit raised his hands, backing into the waiting guards. "It's not what it looks like," he protested, his voice desperate. The guards weren't having any of it. Two of them seized his arms, clapping iron shackles around his wrists. Joy stormed up, looming over the bandit as the guards restrained him. Running didn't do much good, did it? She sneered. One of the guards, an older dwarf with a grizzled beard, turned to Joy. What's this about? Joy jerked a thumb at the bandit. He's a bandit leader. Attacked my caravan on the road to Nesmi and tried to kill my men. The bandit flinched under her words, but stayed silent, his face pale. The guard frowned, sizing him up. We'll take him to the cells, then. We'll hear what he have to say under proper questioning. Good, Joy said, her tone sharp. I'll be back to make sure he talks. Marlene appeared at Joy's side, still far too cheerful. Well, that worked out nicely. I was almost worried you'd lose him again. Joy shot her a glare, but said nothing, watching as the guards marched the bandit leader away. The man glanced back once, meeting her eyes with a look that was equal parts anger and fear. Don't think this is over, he muttered darkly, just loud enough for her to hear. Joy's brow furrowed, but she crossed her arms, unbothered. You'll wish it was by the time I'm done with you. As the guards disappeared into the night with their captive, Marlene nudged Joy playfully. So, what now, oh fearless leader? Joy grunted, turning back toward the tavern. Now, I drink. You can do whatever it is you do, wizard. Marlene laughed, following her inside. Oh, I think I'll stick around. You're far too interesting to leave alone. Joy made her way back to her table, dropping into her chair with a grunt. She grabbed her tankard, half full, thankfully, and took a long swig of ale. The warmth spread through her chest, dulling the edge of her temper. Marlene plopped herself into the chair across from her, looking far too pleased with herself. You're welcome, by the way. Joy set her tankard down with a thud. For what? Setting the whole damn tavern on edge. The illusionist grinned, completely unfazed. Please. I saved your bandit from slipping out the back door. A little fire never hurt anyone. Joy rolled her eyes and waved for another drink. Lucky for you, I'm too tired to care. The innkeeper, clearly eager to make up for the earlier chaos, brought over a fresh round. On the house, he said, forcing a smile. For the trouble. Joy took the tankard and nodded in thanks. She leaned back, letting the weight of the day finally sink into her shoulders. Her muscles ached, her ribs still bruised from the earlier ambush, but at least now she could sit, drink, and breathe. Marlene tilted her head, watching Joy closely. You always this cheerful? Only when I'm around nosy wizards, Joy muttered, though there was no real venom in her voice. The night stretched on, and Joy let herself drink slowly. The tavern's buzz gradually returned. Laughter, clinking tankards, a bard strumming a quiet tune in the corner. Marlene, to Joy's surprise, didn't chatter endlessly, but seemed content to people watch, occasionally tossing out comments that made Joy snort into her ale. As the room grew warmer and the drink settled into her bones, Joy's mood began to lighten. She caught a group of dwarves at a nearby table giving her sidelong glances, muttering to each other. When she turned their way, one of them, Rurik, her one-eyed comrade, lifted his tankard in salute. Care to join us, Captain? He called, his words slightly slurred. We'll drink to your axe and the cowards who ran from it. Joy smirked, pushing back her chair. Why not? The dwarfs cheered as she stomped over, dragging a chair into the circle. Tankards clashed in toasts, and soon stories of the ambush flowed freely, each one embellished just a little more as the ale flowed. And then Joy here, Rurik bellowed, swings that axe of hers like she's trying to cut the whole forest in half. Sent two bandits flying clean through the air. He flung his arms wide for emphasis, nearly knocking over a lantern. Just doing my job, Joy rumbled, though her grin betrayed her pride. Hours passed in a blur of stories, laughter, and far too much ale. The tavern swayed gently as Joy leaned back, her cheeks warm and tusks showing through a rare, easy smile. For the first time in weeks, she let herself relax. No orders, no ambushes, just good company and a solid tankard in her hand. When the night finally slowed, Marlene appeared at her side, her mischievous grin still intact. "So, Joy," she said, her voice soft enough to keep the dwarves from overhearing. "Do you think the bandit was telling the truth? That someone paid for the attack?" Joy's smile faded just a little. She stared into her empty tankard for a moment before answering. "I don't know, but if he was, I'll find out who's behind it." Marlene's eyes sparkled in the low light. "Good, because I think this adventure of yours is just getting started." The night continued as Joy drank more. Joy leaned heavily against the bar, her tankard half empty as she nursed the last dregs of ale. Her earlier attempts at conversation had been met with awkward laughs, stammered excuses, and a surprising number of patrons suddenly remembering they had somewhere very important to be. One fellow even fled mid-sentence, leaving behind his unfinished stew and a spoon spinning on the table. Joy watched him go with a disappointed grunt. "Cowards," she muttered into her drink. "Can't handle a bit of charm." Her grin was lopsided and lazy as she scanned the room for fresh prospects, though the tavern was thinning out. That's when the door creaked open, letting in the chill of the night and a handsome town guard. The town guard stepped in, shaking frost off his cloak and running a hand through his wind-tousled brown hair. A lantern near the entrance cast him in warm light, picking up the worn leather of his armor and the exhaustion written on his face. He'd clearly just come off shift, but he carried himself with quiet confidence, even as his gaze swept the room. Joy's eyes lit up, her attention snapping to him like an arrow to a target. "Well now." The guard's eyes caught her look almost immediately. How could he not? Her towering frame was hard to miss, especially paired with the lopsided grin she aimed his way. Most men might have faltered under that kind of attention, but he just blinked, his brow furrowing slightly in curiosity. Joy straightened, well, as much as a tipsy half-orc can straighten, and waved a heavy hand in his direction. "Aye, guard," she called, her voice loud enough to turn a few heads. "You look like you need a drink." He paused mid-step, clearly debating whether to ignore her or not. After a moment, he sighed through his nose and approached the bar. "Joy Stonefist, isn't it?" he said, his voice steady but laced with caution. Her grin widened. "Oh, he knows me name. You flatter me. And you are?" "Garrett Bandlewood," he replied. "How did you know my name?" Joy asked with a quizzical look on her face. "It's not hard," Garrett replied dryly, motioning to the barkeep for a tankard. "You're the loudest person in the room." Joy barked a laugh, slapping the counter. "Huh, and proud of it." She leaned closer, her voice dropping into something that might have been sultry if it weren't so gruff. "But tell me, lad, are you always this charming, or am I just lucky tonight?" Garrett arched a brow at her, clearly unimpressed, or trying to appear that way. "How much have you had to drink?" "Not enough." Joy smirked, swirling what remained of her ale. "But maybe you could fix that." The barkeep placed a fresh tankard in front of Garrett, who ignored Joy's quip long enough to take a steady drink. When he finally set the tankard down, his gaze met hers steady, unreadable, but with a hint of something. Amusement? Curiosity? It was hard to tell. "You're relentless, aren't you?" he said at last. Joy tilted her head, one tusk catching the firelight as she grinned. "Aye. Most men run off and don't stick around long enough to hear me talk." Garrett held her gaze, unflinching. "I've faced worse." For a moment, there was silence. Then Joy let out a genuine, hearty laugh, leaning back as if she'd found the best joke in the world. "Hells, I like you already." Garrett allowed himself a small smile, lifting his tankard. Lucky me. Joy laughed loudly, drawing a few looks from nearby tables. Huh, you're either brave or daft. I can't decide which. Maybe both, Garrett replied, cracking the barest of smiles. Before Joy could respond, her eyes glazed slightly as the ale fully caught up with her. She swayed a little in her seat, blinking hard to focus. Garrett's faint smirk softened as he realized she was on the verge of passing out. From the other side of the room, Marlene Etosh appeared as if summoned by some sixth sense. The illusionist swirled over dramatically, her colorful robes fluttering as she approached Joy and Garrett's table. "Oh, dear," Marlene said with mock concern, placing a hand on Joy's shoulder. "Looks like someone's had a bit too much fun tonight." "I'm fine," Joy muttered, though her words were sluggish and barely coherent. Marlene gave Garrett a quick, knowing look. "She's not fine. I've seen this before. She's about to face plant into that table if we don't intervene." Garrett shrugged. "I'll leave her to you then. You seem to have things handled." "Oh, don't you worry," Marlene chirped, looping an arm around Joy's shoulders and hauling the half-orc to her feet with surprising ease. Joy mumbled something unintelligible, her head lolling forward as Marlene began guiding her toward the stairs leading to the tavern rooms. "Come along, darling. You need a nice cozy bed before you break something or someone," Marlene teased. She glanced back at Garrett, offering a sly grin. "Thanks for keeping her company. She'll be much more coherent in the morning." Garrett raised his drink in a small toast as Marlene disappeared with Joy up the stairs, the half-orc grumbling incoherently the entire way. The tavern gradually returned to its normal rhythm, though a few patrons exchanged amused glances. At the top of the stairs, Marlene guided Joy into an empty room, setting her down gently on the bed. Joy flopped onto her back with a contented sigh, already half asleep. "You're lucky you've got me around," Marlene muttered fondly, pulling a blanket over her. "Otherwise, who knows what kind of trouble you'd get into." Joy's only response was a loud, unladylike snore. Marlene chuckled softly, shaking her head. "Rest up, big girl. Tomorrow's another day." With that, she snuffed out the room's lantern and slipped out, leaving Joy to her well-earned sleep.
Why don't orcs use elevators? Because they always take things to a whole new level. With our axes. Why did the orc bring a ladder to the bar? Because someone told him the drinks were on the house. Ha, ha, ha.